Hello there guys, it's me Unstable Voltage, and today there has been some very special news. Firaxis and 2K have revealed Civilization 6. Well, we had a theory that this was coming for quite a while now. The previous game, Civilization 5, because we're not counting Beyond Earth, Civ 5 is about 5 or 6 years old now. It's been around for quite a while. It's had 2 expansions and a handful of DLCs, and it's pretty much at the end of its life. It is still one of the most played games on Steam, and it is probably one of the most played strategy games currently, maybe with the exception of Stellaris that launched a few days ago. And brilliant timing from 2K, by the way, announcing it literally the same week that Stellaris came out. And I thought I'd just put this little video together just to sort of get my thoughts out on what I've seen of Civilization 6 so far, which I have to say has been very little. So far, it has been limited to the cinematic trailer, which is narrated by brilliant actor and fellow countryman Sean Bean, and 3 screenshots, and that's about it, really. It's already gone up on Steam. You can pre-order. There's a release date for the 21st of October already planned in, so that's just over 5 months away. And yeah, there's a few things I'd like to talk about with it. First of all, the cinematic trailer is absolutely fantastic. Firaxis really do put some good cinematics out there, and the sort of the intros and the cinematics for all the previous Civ games have been really, really good. But then looking at the screenshots, one thing that I do notice is, while the graphics do look very colourful, very bright, very pretty, and they certainly do everything they need to get the information across to the player, one thing that I have noticed is that the graphic style, the aesthetic, does seem very cartoony. It has that really sort of over-exaggerated, cartoony look that I think Settlers is probably the closest game that I can compare it to, which is quite strange because the earlier Civilization games did have a sort of a hyper-reality cartoony look. But then when they got into Civilization 5 and Civilization Beyond Earth, they sort of went down a more realistic route. And I think it's only the recent additions to the Civ franchise, if you're counting the sort of mobile games, I think it's Civilization Revolution. There was 2 of those, I think, 1 and 2. And they had that more cartoony look, presumably because it was easier to run on a less powerful mobile device than on a desktop PC. Now, I personally, I'm not decided whether I like this new graphic style over the realism of Civilization 5. But one thing that I have noticed is, after watching a lot of different videos with different YouTubers and streamers talking about the announcement, and bear in mind most of those being people who do a lot of Civilization 5 content, meaning the majority of their viewers probably are Civilization fans, and therefore I'm guessing most of these comments are coming from Civilization fans. Nearly all of the comments that I've seen have been negative towards the art style. Almost every single comment I have read, somebody has said that what's going on with the cartoony graphics. And I guess that's always the danger of developing a game, particularly a sequel of a well-loved franchise, behind closed doors. Because you get so far through the production, you reveal what you've done so far, and then suddenly get a massive amount of feedback from the existing player base that they don't particularly like the way you've made a change. But the game's only 5 months out. Now, these screenshots, of course, they could just be concept screens, they could be bull shots, they could be from the actual in-game engine. We don't know any of this at the moment. And again, it is very early days, but I think it's a little bit too late now for them to change the graphic style. Sure, it might be refined and tweaked, but I can't see it being greatly different from what we can see in the screenshots. Of course, screenshots, great graphics don't necessarily make a great game, so, you know, even if you don't particularly like the graphic style, it still might end up being the best Civilization game to date. Now, the head developer for Civilization 6, and I'm sorry to say, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but it is actually the guy who was one of the developers on the expansion packs for Civilization 5, so it was actually one of the guys who worked on Gods and Kings and Brave New World. So at least we do have someone with pedigree from Civilization 5 coming into Civilization 6. So there's a few changes that they have made, and again I'm just going through the sort of bullet points that they've listed about what we can expect in Civilization 6. Again, nobody really knows exactly what these things mean, so I'll try and go through and have a look at what they might mean. Basically, one thing that they have done is what they call the expansive empires. So now, a city actually spans multiple tiles. So a lot of people are likening this to Endless Legend, where you actually build districts and it occupies more and more tiles as your city grows. But I actually personally think that it's going to be more like Warlock Masters of the Arcane, where instead of just putting down a building within your city, you're actually going to have to put that building down on one of the tiles within your borders. And that means you're going to be limited because you can only put certain buildings on certain types of terrain. Now, the reason they want to do this is to make it so that your build order is more random. Currently, if you look at Civilization 5, most people playing tend to build the same old buildings in the same order. Sometimes there's some slight variation depending on the situation, but more often than not, you find a good meta and you tend to stick to it. Because you're now going to be limited by the randomness of the terrain, you might have to completely change your build order because you may not have the appropriate tiles within your city's borders to build the buildings you want in a certain order. So it means that you'll have to play things a little bit differently on every single game because the map is so random. And I think that's a good thing. I think that is one of the problems that Civilization 5 does suffer with, particularly if you're playing it on the higher difficulty levels. You do tend to get stuck in a rut and tend to play the same actions, the same plays, the same build orders. You research things in the same order, and you tend to do that over and over again. Which brings to the second point, the active research. Basically, what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to do things that can actually unlock and speed up certain techs. So instead of just working your way through a relatively linear tech tree in a certain order, you'll be able to do things within the map, within the world, that will actually unlock certain techs and give you a boost to speed them up. So it's going to mean you'll be able to mix up the order in which you discover your techs. So add that in with the new system of expanding your city and building the city's buildings. I think it's going to mean for a lot more variety in the playstyle between different matches. They're also adding a system called Dynamic Diplomacy, which is where basically now the interactions you can have with other civilizations change over the course of the game, because you start off as sort of, primitives and work all the way up to sort of modern day. In previous Civilization games, you've been able to pretty much do all of the same diplomatic actions right from the beginning of the game right through to the end of the game. Sure, some of them were locked behind certain era walls, such as research agreements and open borders required a certain tech and things like that, but I think what it's going to be now is during the beginning of the game, you're probably only really to be hostile and maybe have some very primitive niceties. Getting things like embassies will probably come much later, and getting things like alliances and defensive pacts will probably be much closer towards the end of the game. Now, they've got a thing called Combined Arms. They are keeping the combat system essentially the same as it was in Civ 5, as opposed to games like Civ 4 and Age of Wonders, where instead of having a massive stack that all move around on a single tile, you have one unit per tile, which I think is a lot better because it means you have to play more tactically during the combat. But now these units can actually be supported. You can add extra units into them. So it's still one unit per tile, but you can kind of mix the unit up a little bit to make it better in some circumstances and probably a little bit weaker in others. So it's almost like giving the unit a promotion, or just giving it a little bit of a tweak to sort of fine-tune it for specific circumstances. Apparently they've also added a few things to the multiplayer modes as well. They seem to have focused a bit more on cooperative play. There is competitive as well, but apparently they've added a number of what they call situations. It says, where's the bump? In addition to the multiplayer modes, cooperate and compete with your friends in a wide variety of situations, all designed to be easily completed within a single session. So it sounds like they've put in some sort of goals to accomplish, either in a competitive game or a cooperative game, but they've done it in a way that you don't have to invest 8 hours into a single game to draw to the natural conclusion, which is probably really good, because one of the hardest things I find about Civilization 5 is getting enough friends together, all together at the same time, for long enough to play a full game. I've had so many games of Civilization 5 and Beyond Earth where we've started a multiplayer game and never finished it because we never get the same group of people together again at the same time. And finally, they are saying that this is a Civ for all players. So apparently it provides veteran players with new ways to build and tune their civilization for the greatest chance of success. Now that may mean that you can actually sort of build or customize your own civilization. It doesn't really say. It's a little bit sort of vague, or maybe it just means that you've got to basically learn new mechanics and relearn to play the game, so it's going to be a bit more different now because of these changes in the mechanics and the way in which you build and research stuff. But it also says there's going to be a new tutorial system to introduce new players to the underlying concepts, so I'm not necessarily sold on that. I'm yet to see a strategy game that does a tutorial particularly well, but they might have come up with a solution for that. I really don't know. I think it is fantastic that they do seem to be trying to get new players into the franchise. I think strategy is a very sort of niche market, and a lot of strategy games are often very overwhelming for new people who aren't used to them and maybe want to start. They, look at the massive amounts of videos there are of them, DLCs, expansion packs. Particularly if you go and look at things like EU4, I mean, most people see that and think, oh, that could be interesting. They watch one video of it and just leave feeling totally confused. So it's very understandable. And maybe that's why they've decided to go with this sort of cartoony aesthetic. Maybe it's to lighten the game up and make it look a little bit more casual friendly, in the hope that it will attract a more casual or non-strategy game audience. I really don't know what the idea is behind that. The one thing that I have noticed, currently, like I said, you can pre-order on Steam, and I'm looking at the UK prices here, of course, being in the UK myself. The standard edition is currently on for £49.99, so £50, which is more than $60. I think it's about $68 or something like that, so that's very high price for even a AAA game. I mean, we're sort of getting into EA kind of pricing with that. And then they've also got the digital deluxe edition, which is £70, which is near enough $100. So it doesn't even say on Steam what the digital deluxe version is. I assume it's probably some sort of season pass, because apparently they've already announced, and this is just sort of third-hand information because I've read it and seen it somewhere else, but I can't see it on Steam. They've apparently already announced 4 different DLCs, which I believe are all additional civilizations, which is pretty much how they did it in Civ 5. There were even though you did get some additional civilizations with the 2 expansion packs, there were a few civs that were available as separate DLCs, although most of them also came with single player scenario content. So I can't quite understand that pricing structure. It does seem a little bit high, particularly if you are trying to aim your strategy game at a new generation of strategy players and entice them in. Maybe a sort of a $70 title is not the best way to do that. But again, we're 5 months away from release. It's quite possible these things will change before the actual release date comes around. Either way, I'm going to be keeping my eye on this because I've been very, very excited to hear of a Civilization 6 for the longest time now. And I'm going to do my best to try and get a copy from 2K before launch, hopefully. It's not always likely. I'm not the biggest of YouTubers, and therefore I don't go to the top of the priority list when it comes to getting keys for stuff. And even if I do get a key, it's probably going to be like it was with XCOM, and of course, the best we can probably hope for is a couple of weeks before launch, and there'll probably be some sort of embargo anyway, meaning that I wouldn't be able to show certain things. But it is definitely a game, one way or another, come what may. After the 21st of October, assuming the game isn't delayed, there will be Civilization 6 content on the channel. It's definitely a game that I'm going to get one way or another. It's definitely a game that I'm going to play one way or another, because I am feeling a bit burnt out now on Civilization 5, so Civ 6 couldn't really have come at a better time. But that's my thoughts on Civilization 6. Like I said, we don't have an awful lot of information to go on, but, you know, sort of watch this space, keep your eye on it, maybe go and add it to your wish list on Steam, just so you get sort of notified of any updates and things like that. But yeah, I think it could be interesting to see, and I'm quite excited. I can't wait until October. So thanks a lot for listening, guys, and I'll see you on the next video. Until then, goodbye for now.